We are continuing in our class on apologetics. In this section, we are discussing that the Bible is the Word of God and the certainty of that. And today's quote comes from Douglas Hofstadter, and he says, "There are various theories on the origin of life. They all run around on this most central of all central questions. How did the genetic code, along with the mechanisms for its translation, ribosomes and RNA molecules, originate? For the moment, we will have to content ourselves with a sense of wonder and awe rather than with an answer." And what does that mean? That means we won't take the answer that it is from God. We will content ourselves with just, we can't answer this question. It's too complicated for us. It's beyond our ability to find an answer. But we're not going to go with the obvious, which is we have a creator. Not going to do it. And so we follow that with, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Okay, I can tell you right now that Douglas was not there. All right. I wasn't there either, but I know Douglas wasn't there either, even though Douglas is older than me. He's not that old. But where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? You don't. You weren't there. And if you weren't there, then you can't say you know how it was done. And we have the audacity and the hubris and the arrogance to think we know what a young planet looks like, how planets were formed, how stars were formed, how galaxies were formed. You don't know. You weren't there. And here most recently, I'm hearing these things coming out from astronomy and the like, astronomers and the like, of where with what is being seen by telescopes today, and I mean like the James Webb telescope, but that's not the only one, but mostly that one, of things such as the universe is misbehaving. The universe can't misbehave. What do you mean the universe is misbehaving? It's that it's not doing what we think it ought to do. It's not doing what we said it would be doing. All right, so you're going to claim that you're still right, but the universe is doing something wrong? Or are you going to have to say, well, the universe has been doing this, maybe we need to refigure? And that's the thing they don't like to do, because they have been standing on the reputations of others before them and having an absolute pride in humanism, and that we are intelligent enough to figure these things out, somehow form it. All these things were formed without God. It's an impossibility. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know, or who stretched out the line upon it? To what were the foundations fastened, or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. All right, somebody was there, but it wasn't Job. Somebody witnessed it, but it wasn't Job. And these sons of God that are shouting for joy, and I take that very literal, that there were others there that were not part of the Godhead, of angelic beings, that they witnessed these things. They were not part of it. They didn't build it. They didn't speak it into creation, but they witnessed it happening. And they saw all these things. But Job, however, had no part in any of this. Now, we continue in day 6 in Genesis 1. And this is a very clever creature, by the way. Those that have gardens do not like these guys. They can outsmart you. The only way to defeat these is to have a dog that'll go after them. That's about the only thing you can do. I don't know what else you could do about it. Cats are no good. I can tell you, cats, they go after smaller things. But a sizable rabbit, unless you have one really hulky cat, they can't get a full-grown rabbit. Nevertheless, all right. Now, I'm going to an argument I heard years ago. And this is a juvenile argument. It's a silly argument, but we're going to look at it. And it goes like this. The Bible cannot be true because it never speaks of dinosaurs. It's got to speak of dinosaurs, right? If it's from God, it would have to speak of dinosaurs. Well, I've got a list of some things that the Bible doesn't speak about. One, and I've already mentioned cats. All right, cats aren't mentioned. Rabbits are mentioned. Cats aren't mentioned. Dogs are mentioned. Fleas are mentioned. Cats aren't mentioned. Squirrels, llamas, pandas, shrimp, grizzly bears, narwhals, penguins, tree frogs, plankton, prairie dogs, jellyfish, wallabies, mongoose, or lemons. None of them, and I've got more over here, none of them are mentioned in the Bible. So what does that mean? Does the Bible have to list everything that God created in the animal world plus everything else He created? We wouldn't be able to hold it. We wouldn't be able to print it. We wouldn't be able to write it. We would still be writing down these things because God made billions of stars and He knows them all by name. He has given them names. And now, let's just look at some things. All right, so the Bible can't be true. Surely it would speak about dinosaurs. Well, first off, I have to explain this, especially to younger folks, that the word dinosaur is an English word. It didn't come around till 1842. And we will just, is Richard Owen. He's the one that created that word. He was a biologist and paleontologist. He was the word dinosaur came into something that he published in 1843, I do believe. It is Report on British Fossil Reptiles. And that is when he coined the phrase dinosaur. But when I was a kid, the way it was taught to me concerning Robert Owen and the like Richard Owen and the like, is that no one ever saw a dinosaur bone until you get into the 1800s when suddenly they're discovered. And one would think, surely someone came across these before then. Well, yeah, they did. It just wasn't really taught. Romans displayed dinosaur bones in their homes, as did the Greeks, as did who knows who else. If you found something that was this astonishing and you wanted to impress folks, well, you would take it back home and show it to them. And Augustus, that would be Caesar, he had I think it was a summer house where he showcased fossils, and they didn't call them dinosaurs. Once again, that didn't come till the 19th century. But they did call them dragons, giants, sea monsters, and other things, as just, they're just calling them whatever they think they happen to be. And but dragon and sea monster, yeah, giants too. That would be going a long way into understanding as to what they are. But in 1676, Robert Plot, professor of chemistry at Oxford, he was the first curator of the Ashmolean Museum, which is still there today. In 1677, he published the Natural History of Oxfordshire and identified fossilized bones, and they came out of a quarry close by. But he thought that these were possibly giant humans and such like titans from Greek mythology. All right, this is getting to the 1600s and things like that. Still, not quite understanding what they were looking at because not everything had been gathered up at that point. But we have to ask this question. What if the Bible did mention dinosaurs? What if it did mention dinosaurs? What then? And here comes this little flip-floppy kind of argument of the Bible doesn't mention dinosaurs, therefore it must be false. The Bible, okay, it mentions dinosaurs, but it can't mention dinosaurs because man and dinosaurs didn't live at the same time, therefore it can't mention dinosaurs. Well, which is it? All right, which is it? You say one thing and you say the other thing, as though if this had any kind of meaning, whether it mentioned dinosaurs or not, why even bring it up if it had no meaning at all? All right? What then? What if you do have the mentioning of dinosaurs there? Now, it's not going to call them dinosaurs by name. Once again, that doesn't come around to the 19th century. But we go with behemoth first. And behemoth is a massive herbivore beast. It's monstrous. This is huge. And we're going to see it being described by God. And also, I want you to notice, here we are, Job chapter 40, beginning in verse 15. Look now at the behemoth. God is speaking to Job, and he knows, Job knows what a behemoth is. Now, that is a very old Hebrew name. That's a Hebrew word, very old. And, all right, so he says, look now at the behemoth. So Job would know what that is. Not that one was standing right in front of Job, but Job would know what that was. All right, which I made along with you, he eats grass like an ox. All right, so he's not an ox, but he eats grass like one. He's an herbivore. And which I made along with you means that God made Job, and God also made behemoth. Job just comes a lot later. Quite a distance later. Of course, I don't know when the book of Job was written, but I take Job, I think Job has to be after the flood. Job has to come around after the repopulating of the earth. Probably between when Noah and his family come off the ark to where we get to Abraham. He's probably somewhere in there, but I don't know, really. But he says, I made you both. I made you both. And this is after asking the question, chapter 38 and verse 4, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. All right. He asks that question. Now he's telling him about behemoth. All right. Let me show you some things about behemoth. See now, his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. So this has some powerful legs, and this is a very powerful creature. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. All right, so whatever this is has a tail like a cedar. Now, there are those who do not like the idea that they're talking about a dinosaur. And so they want to make this into something like an elephant or a hippo, but their tails could not be called a cedar. Matter of fact, I've seen golden retrievers with more impressive tails than is on a hippo, and horses with far more impressive tails than a hippo. And none of them are like a cedar. None of them are. Because we're talking about something that's big. It's huge. And if its tail is like a cedar, what's the rest of its body like? You can't have this small animal with this massive tail. It has to be a massive animal with a massive tail. And the sinews of its thighs are tightly knit. Now, just a few weeks ago, we talked about giraffes and the design of the giraffe. And that the giraffe, being that its head is way up here and its hooves are way down here, and you have just this incredible downhill path, steep downhill path from head to hooves, that if someone came along, or just by accident this happened, that the giraffe was slashed at the leg, that you'd think it would just bleed out. That you have all this pressure going quite a number of feet up, however tall the giraffe may be. It's uphill, that it just bleed out and that thing would pass out pretty quick and then die. But it doesn't, because it too has sinews that are tightly knit, and it keeps it from doing that. It keeps it from bleeding out, which would be the same for this animal as well. His bones are like beams of bronze, and his ribs like bars of iron. So here is impressive. These beams of bronze show not only a powerful beast, but big. My femurs, that's the longest bone in the human body, could not be called beams. And with a cow's leg bones could not be called beams, or any part of a cow called beams. But this is something that is huge. His ribs like bars of iron. This is very strong bones and very large bones, because this is a large animal. And notice, this is another thing that gives a clue. He's big. He is the first of the ways of God. What would that mean? Now, he's not talking about planets and stars, and he's not talking about things in the ocean, and he's not talking about things that fly. He's talking about things that are on land and land animals at this moment. He's first of the ways of God would mean he's about the biggest thing on land, and probably is the biggest thing on land. And that he's when God created, he created. It wasn't just a smattering of good ideas. He was showing an extraordinary ability, large and small, of having various attributes and having various functions on this earth. The bee has a function. Also, this behemoth had a function, whatever that happened to have been. Only he who made him can bring near his sword. So, don't think that you can easily kill this thing. Even though it's an herbivore, and you don't really have to be afraid of it so much, though there are certain herbivores you better be afraid of, like an elephant. Yeah, if you've ever seen a mad elephant, you don't want to be around one. And a hippo will kill you faster than probably faster than a polar bear. But you don't want to get close to this guy, and you don't want him stepping on you. That's for sure. But don't go after him to kill him, because that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. Surely the mountains yield food for him, and all the beasts of the field play there. All right? This is a large area, and this is where he eats. And so I was going to mention some other places where he is found. He lies under the lotus tree in a covert of reeds and marsh. This is where he's going to find a lot of food. And he can be in a marsh. He can be in these places and eat as much as he wants, because there's going to be a lot of things there to eat. Put him in the desert, he's going to die. He's going to need a lot of water. He's going to need a lot of food. And this is where you're going to find him. And yes, there can be trees larger than him. The lotus tree covers him with their shade. The willows by the brook surround him. So he's in the brook, he's in the marsh, he's in these places. That's where he lives. Indeed, the river may rage, yet he is not disturbed. He is confident, though the Jordan gushes into his mouth. He can easily just wade and walk right into a river, and he's not bothered by it, because he's huge. He's not bothered at all. It's not that he knows how to swim necessarily, but he's big and he can take care of himself. And I just envision something like this easily walking across the Mississippi River, and just not having any problem whatsoever, just keeping its head up and walking along the bottom and going on to the other side. He's confident, though the Jordan gushes into his mouth. This is where he lives. This is what he does. Though he takes it in his eyes, or one pierce his nose with a snare. So we look at the attributes here. He eats grass. Strength is in his hips and stomach muscles. Tail like a cedar. Sinews tightly knit. Bones are like beams of bronze. Ribs like bars of iron. Found in marshes and by brooks. Can stand in a raging river. All right. So now what I'm going to show you is a good guess. It's not necessarily that anybody's got this right, but it's a very good guess. And he looks like that. All right. This is Argentinosaurus. If you want to see the bones of one, all you have to do is go to Fernbank. And that's basically in the entrance. And this was a huge animal. And yeah, this was found in Argentina. That's why it's called that. This is a huge monster. Matter of fact, this is from Fernbank, right there. And they have these bones on display. Now, personally, I would call those beams. Personally, I would. That's huge. That's a huge thing. And there would be your bars of iron right there. Now, granted, I may be wrong about this, and I'm not the only one who thinks this. I may be wrong about it, but this is a pretty good guess that if Behemoth is larger than this, whoo, that's a big beast. But this thing is huge. And this is looking from above. And this is in a different museum entirely. And here we have basically the size difference of some of these extraordinary animals. And here is like this family up here of this type of animal. And here we have a comparison between the Argentinosaurus and, well, that's us right there, and these other, what we would consider to be very large animals, such as the Tyrannosaurus rex, and etc. But these are monstrous. And I would have to say, something like that, yeah, that could stand in a river. And it could, if it needed to, it'd stand on its hind legs in a river, balance on its tail. It'd be easy to do. How tall would it then be? I don't know. It'd be pretty tall. And it's not worried with a flooding river at all. Now, we go to this. This is Leviathan. This is Job 41. Behemoth is brought out because he's huge. Leviathan is brought out because he's terrifying. This is a vicious beast. When the ancient world being in fear of sea monsters, well, this is one. This is one of them. And you would be afraid, or you should be afraid of this. Job 3 and 8. Now, we're going to look in verse 41 where it's discussed, but it already is brought up in chapter 3 of Job. May those who curse it, who curse the day, those who are ready to arouse Leviathan. And so Leviathan's already been brought up in the dialogue that is going on in Job. Throughout most of the book. The first part of the book is a narrative. The very, very first part of the book is a narrative bringing us to the dialogue that's now discussing what chapters 1 and 2 had to do with. And now, chapter 41 in verse 1, this is God speaking to Job. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook, or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? Now, we already know that Job knows what Leviathan is because it's already been mentioned. So this is I don't know where Job lived. Don't know at all. Probably he had to have been aware of Leviathan somehow, so he has some kind of awareness of the ocean at least, some kind of sea, something where they at least speak about Leviathan. All right, so he already knows concerning this, and so this question is in fact a rhetorical question, and it is Job would know you can't do this. That is a vicious beast. You're not going to be able to do that. Can you put a reed through his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? No, you're not going to be able to do that either. Will he make many supplications to you? Will he speak softly to you? And the answer again is no. You're not going to make him beg, and you're not going to make him even speak softly. Evidently, this thing can make a noise. Now, fish don't really make noise, but this thing evidently could make some noise, which I believe he has to be air breathing. That this creature has, which I don't have any bones that I would say this is probably Leviathan, because I can't do that. There are some very, very good suspects, but I really can't tell you. But unlike Behemoth, which that would seem to be, that's the biggest one we know, and Behemoth, if that isn't Behemoth, that means Behemoth would be even larger. But will he make many supplications to you? No. Are you going to be able to make him beg? No, you're not. Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him as your servant, as a servant, forever? Once again, no. He's not going to serve anybody. Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you leash him for your maidens? Once again, God is going to these absurd thoughts to show that you don't mess with this thing. You can't tame this thing. You can't make it to where this would be a pet for your kids. This is something that is intrinsically dangerous. Will your companions make a banquet of him? Will they apportion him among the merchants? Once again, no. You don't go fishing for this thing, because you'll lose. You will become a banquet for it. And this would be that nobody does such a thing. You would avoid this and stay away from this. And yes, there are lore from various parts of the earth, not just one part, not just the Mediterranean. There's lore from numerous places, and one could say, well, that's lore. Okay, but still, there can be a kernel of truth in these things. There can be a kernel, or there could be nothing. But I want us to understand there are stories from various places on the earth where they were afraid of large creatures that lived in bays, that lived in the ocean, and I'm not talking about whales, because in all these places that I'm thinking, they had word for whales. They knew what whales were, and they knew that whales weren't necessarily monsters. They went hunting for whales. Okay, and so will your companion make a banquet of him? Will they apportion him among the merchants? Nope, you're not going to be selling him at the fish market. Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Once we have this collection of no's going through here. Lay your hand on him. Remember the battle. Never do it again. And I like the way this is worded. Lay your hand on him. It would just be, imagine what he's going to do to you. Just envision putting your hand on him and envision what he's about to do. And I think you're going to be in his jaws. And he says, remember the battle. And it wouldn't have been much of a battle. Never do it again. And I think that is just a beautiful way of where God knows our imagination. He knows that we can think of these things. And he's dealing with Job as a human being. Indeed, any hope of overcoming him is false. Shall one not be overwhelmed at the sight of him? So this is a fearsome thing. No one is so fierce that he would dare stir him up. Best avoid where he is. Stay away from this guy. Stay away from him altogether. Who has preceded me that I should pay him? Everything under heaven is mine. So here, what God would be saying, what God is saying in this, all right, I made you, Job. I also made Behemoth. Now, there's things about Job that would be extraordinary. And I'm talking about all mankind. Extraordinary that Behemoth doesn't have. That while Behemoth is large and Behemoth is impressive, that mankind is far more impressive, just not as huge. not huge at all compared to it. But I made Behemoth, I made you, I made Leviathan. You can't go and take a sword against Behemoth. You can't go with anything, as you're going to see. You can't take an army after this thing. Or a navy, as the case may be. You're not going to be able to do it because it's not going to go well. So everything under heaven is mine. He created it, and we see this creation. I will not conceal his limbs, his mighty power, or his graceful proportions. This would have been the graceful proportions. This would have been very impressive, beautiful, terrifying, but a beautiful creature. I can, like a horse. A horse has graceful proportions. That's a beautiful animal, or handsome, however you want to put it. That's a beautiful animal. Same with a deer. Deer just has this beautiful design, beautiful proportions to them. And this would be in a similar sort of idea, that this creature is very graceful in its proportions, and the word graceful in that is showing a high degree of design that is there. Mighty in power, graceful in proportions. Who can remove his outer coat? Who can approach him with a double bridle? All right, nobody. Nobody. So he has an outer coat. Now it's going to be described in just a little bit, but this is a scaled animal. This animal is large. This animal cannot be a snake, because snakes don't have that limbs. All right, it's not a snake. But this thing has scales, and most impressive scales that they are. And can you approach him can you put a bridle on him and ride him? Well, no, you can't do that. Who can open the doors of his face with his terrible teeth all around? So here is this thing with lots of teeth, enormous jaw, and just ferocious thing altogether. Now, here's the scales. His rows of scales are his pride, shut up tightly as with a seal. You can't get in between the scales. The scales are his armor, and it's going to show how he considers weapons. Weapons are nothing to him. They're nothing at all. And all of this is tightly, it's sealed up tightly. And with his scales, he knows nothing really. He's at the top of the food chain where he is. He's at the top, and nobody really messes with him. Or is one so near another that no air can come between them? Now that is an unusual thing. That sounds like something we would say today, actually. Something so tight that it's airtight. That doesn't sound like something the ancients would say. Of course, this is God saying it, that the air doesn't even come between these scales. That's how tight they are. You're not going to take a spear and get in between these scales to hurt this creature. They are joined one to another. They stick together and cannot be parted. And the only way this thing is going to die is old age or starvation. It's that's it. Nothing is going to be eating this thing, preying upon it while it is alive. It's not. Now here we go. And this is the words of God. And I take them very literally. And we're going to discuss this. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth goes burning lights, sparks of fire shoot out, smoke goes out of his nostrils as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. I take that literally. God is saying it. He's not saying it poetically. He is saying it literally. He is talking about actual animals and what they do. Now, where do we get, and we're talking about lore, we were talking about lore just a minute ago, where do we get the idea of fire-breathing dragons? And you do know that the idea of dragons is all over the world in various languages, various cultures. They speak of dragons. Of course, by different words because it's different languages. But drawing dragons, and one can look at a Chinese dragon and know, oh yeah, that's a dragon, having no idea concerning Chinese art. One can look at an Aztec dragon and say, oh yeah, that's a dragon. Know it immediately. That's a dragon. Or look at a European dragon, or look at an African dragon, or even pick the place where there have been people there for a long time, and they will have such stories about dragons. And yes, some of them live in the water. Some of them live there. Out of his breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. And one would say, that's impossible. But you know what? There's a thing called the bombardier beetle. Is that impossible? Because the bombardier beetle, though it's not out of its mouth, it mixes two chemicals together and it creates a flame. That is its defense. An extraordinary thing. Is that fiction? Is that impossible? Yet there it is. And there are things in the world that one would, if you didn't know, you'd think, well, that's impossible. An electric eel sounds utterly impossible. Yet go to the aquarium, Georgia Aquarium. You can see them. They're not going to let you touch them. But the petting zoo, they're in the petting zoo. But they're not going to let you touch these things. But there are extraordinary things that God made. Extraordinary things. Now, how does this work? Well, I can't really answer that. I'm not its creator. But there could be very simply that of the ability to exhale something like propane or butane or a natural gas, able to exhale that and to ignite it, and it goes out of its mouth. It could be as simple as that, but I don't know what it's doing. You'd have to study one if it would allow you to study it. But strength dwells in its neck, and sorrow dances before it. The folds of his flesh are joined together. They are firm on him and cannot be moved. His heart is hard as stone, even as hard as the lower millstone. So he has an extraordinarily powerful and hardened kind of heart. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid because of his crashings. They are beside themselves. He's able to raise himself up. All right? Is that coming out of the water? Yeah, that's what that would be. That's exactly what they would. In his crashings, because of his crashings, they are beside themselves. So he's leaping about or doing whatever in the water, and the mighty become immediately afraid of this. Though the sword reaches him, it cannot avail, nor does spear, dart, or javelin. Nothing you can do. You don't have the technology. You don't have the weaponry. You have nothing that can defeat this. Nothing that can bring it low. He regards iron as straw and bronze as rotten wood. They can't pierce him. They can't do much of anything to him. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones become like stubble to him. Darts are regarded as straw. He laughs at the threat of javelins. His undersides are like sharp potsherds. He spreads pointed marks in the mire. Now I want to stop here for a second. His undersides are like sharp potsherds. What are potsherds? That would be like, there's another word for it, potsherds, but that doesn't help very much. It's like broken pieces of pottery. Sharp. All right? Sharp, broken pieces of pottery. Irregular, perhaps, but it's saying undersides are like sharp potsherds. That if you were to touch him, that he'd be extremely jagged underneath, is what you would feel. But here it comes to this: he spreads pointed marks in the mire. Now, what would that mean if he's doing that? What would that mean? He's got to be able to come up on land if he wants to. That's the only thing it can mean, because there is no mire in the ocean that you could view anyway. If it was, the entire ocean is just water. That this would have to mean that if he wants to come up on land, he'll do it. That's not necessarily where he lives or where he's at his best, but you have he's leaving marks in the mire where he has been. And of course, we have plenty of animals that are similar to this, but notice what is being described. While it's not a crocodile, it's not an alligator, because we're not describing that. Crocodiles and alligators don't have scales to begin with, and they don't breathe fire. But here is something that, like a crocodile or an alligator, can come up on land if they want to, or they can spend the entire day in the water if they want to. It's just a matter of where they want to be. And he makes the deep boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a pot of ointment. He leaves a shining wake behind him. One would think the deep had white hair. He is shooting through the water. On earth there's nothing like him which is made without fear. This is the most fearless animal that God ever created. And this would mean even Behemoth could be afraid before this thing would be. This is a thing that doesn't know fear. Extraordinarily confident. He beholds every high thing. He is king over all the children of pride. And now we look at his attributes. Okay, mighty, power, strong, graceful proportions, terrible teeth, covered in tight, impenetrable scales, breathes fire and smoke, heart is hard, raises himself up, weapons are harmless, he can go on land, swims fast in the sea, fearless. All right, put all those together, what does it spell? Well, it spells one word for me, and that would be a dragon. That would be the English word on that. Matter of fact, it's not. That's coming from different language as well. But Job 3 and 8, we've already mentioned that he is mentioned earlier in the book of Job. But Psalm 74:14, you broke the heads of Leviathan in pieces and gave him as food to the people inhabiting the wilderness. Okay, so one would say, well, I thought it just said you wouldn't hunt this thing down and sell it in the marketplace and make a banquet out of it. But this is talking about God doing this. All right, now this is poetic. This is absolutely poetic because God didn't feed the people inhabiting the wilderness with Leviathan meat. But this is showing the power of God. The creator of Leviathan can obviously take something like this and supply his people if he wants. Psalm 104:26, There the ships sail about. There is that Leviathan which you have made to play there. Is just playing in the water, waiting, I guess, for its whatever its prey is. And so also Isaiah 27:1, in that day the Lord will sever sword, great and strong, will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, that twisted serpent, and he will slay the reptile that is in the sea, showing the power of God. And here, just want to bring this out, Leviathan, what we have done in our English translations anyway, and this is the smartest thing to do, is that we have transliterated the Hebrew, but actually in the Septuagint, if you remember how to pronounce these letters, you will come up with the word dracon. That's where we get dragon. Isaiah 27:1 calls this a dragon. All right, so we have run out of time today. I appreciate everybody being with us. And next week we will continue. Thank you.